the time on Channel 9, and I know that Tony's a guy who likes to have a laugh, and he certainly overstepped his bounds there. And he's, as you guys have talked about earlier in the show,
Picture the scoreboard of history. 24 names could fit at the very top, but only two ever have. Two players separated by decades, separated by eras, separated by everything except one number. 24 Grand Slam titles. And tonight, we're going to tell you why that number is both the most unifying and the most divisive figure in the entire sport of tennis. For as long as tennis has existed, the Grand Slam has been the ultimate prize. Not just a trophy, not just a title, but immortality. Every young player who has ever picked up a racket has dreamed of one day standing where the legend stood, holding up a trophy at Wimbledon, at the US Open, at Roland Garros, at the Australian Open. These four tournaments are the mountain peaks of the sport, and only the rarest of champions ever reach the summit again and again and again. At the very top of that mountain, two names stand shoulder to shoulder. Novak, Djokovic, Margaret, 24 titles each. A tie across generations, across eras, across a divide that runs far deeper than most fans realize, because here is the twist buried inside this record. Novak Djokovic built his 24 trophies entirely within the modern professional open era. Every single title earned in the fiercest, most competitive version of tennis the world has ever seen, against athletes with better training, better equipment, and deeper fields than ever before. Margaret Court, on the other hand, won 13 of her 24 titles before the open era even began, back in the amateur days of the 1960s, a completely different world of tennis. Same number. Two very different journeys. And that difference is where the Real story begins. Right behind them, we find Serena Williams standing alone with 23 Grand Slam titles, the most dominant force of the modern era, a woman who redefined power and resilience on the court for over 2 decades. Then comes a tie that feels almost poetic. Rafael Nadal and Steffi Graf, frozen together in tennis history with 22 trophies each. Nadal, the undisputed king of clay, the man who claimed 14 championships at Roland Garros alone, a record so staggering it may never be touched again. Graf, the only player in the history of the sport, man or woman, to complete the Golden Slam, winning all 4 majors and Olympic gold in the very same calendar year. Untouchable, unrepeated, unmatched, and still the list goes on. Roger Federer with 20 trophies, the final name to cross that magical 20-title threshold, and the undisputed king of Wimbledon with 8 championships on that hallowed grass. Behind him, the legends of women's tennis continue to echo through history. Helen Wills Moody with 19 titles, Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova, both frozen at 18 apiece, rivals who defined an entire era of women's tennis with their fierce and unforgettable battles. This is the list. This is the mountain. Djokovic and Court at the summit, the rest of the legends trailing just behind. A single unified ranking that treats every Grand Slam title, regardless of who won it, as equal in weight and equal in glory. But then, something happened. Something that turned this list from a simple piece of tennis trivia into a full-blown controversy. It happened during a broadcast. A media company put up a graphic, the very same list we just walked through, with Djokovic and Court sitting together at the top with 24 titles each. A completely ordinary moment in sports television. Except one man in that studio was not going to let it pass without a reaction. Jim Courier, a former world #1 himself, a man who has lived inside the world of professional tennis for decades, looked at that graphic and something inside him snapped. He didn't stay quiet. He didn't let the moment pass. Instead, he turned the conversation into a challenge, a direct confrontation with the way tennis presents its own history. He reached for a comparison that stopped viewers in their tracks. Golf. Think about golf for a moment, he said. In that sport, nobody dares merge the men's major championship record with the women's major championship record. They exist as 2 completely separate lists, 2 completely separate stories, never combined, never compared. So, why, he demanded, does tennis do it differently? His words landed like a spark on dry grass. We don't see golf compare men's major records with women's major records. So, why does tennis do this? It makes no sense. I am over that graphic. Almost instantly, tennis fans, journalists, and former players split into two roaring camps. One side rushed to defend Courier, insisting he had simply stated an obvious truth that many had been too afraid to say out loud, that men's and women's tennis, however connected by history, are still two separate competitions with separate physical demands, separate tours, and separate stories. But the other side saw something more troubling in his words. They worried that by pulling apart the numbers by separating Djokovic from court, Nadal from Graf, Federer from Evert, and Navratilova, something priceless might be lost. The idea that a Grand Slam title means exactly the same thing no matter who lifts the trophy. To them, splitting the list didn't feel like clarity. It felt like diminishment, an accidental suggestion that women's achievements deserve a smaller stage, a separate shelf. Yet, in the middle of this storm, most observers arrived at the same conclusion. Jim Courier likely never intended to insult or diminish women's tennis. His argument was not born from disrespect, but from a genuine belief that men's and women's tennis are, and always have been, two distinct entities, each with its own history, its own legends, and its own path to greatness. And so, the true battle isn't really about Djokovic or court or Nadal or Graf. It's about something much bigger. Should tennis be remembered as one unified story or two parallel ones running side by side? Supporters of the unified view point to something undeniable, that tennis remains one of the only global sports where men and women share the exact same stage at the exact same tournaments in the exact same weeks. From the Grand Slams to Indian Wells, Miami, Madrid, and Rome, fans get to witness the greatest men and women in the sport competing under the very same roof, on the very same courts, in the very same days. To them, a Grand Slam title is a Grand Slam title, full stop. 24 is 24, whether it was lifted by Djokovic in the modern era of blistering baseline rallies or by court decades earlier in a very different game. The achievement, the pressure, the years of sacrifice, all of it deserves equal recognition on a single, shared list. And maybe in the end, that's the real lesson buried inside this entire storm. The debate itself, fiery, emotional, and unresolved, is proof of how deeply people care about this sport and its history. Because whether you believe the record books should stand as one list or two, one truth remains untouched. The hunger for greatness, the years of sacrifice, and the love for this game connect every single name on that list, men and women alike. And soon, new names will rise to challenge these legends. Jannik Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, Aryna Sabalenka, the next generation, ready to write their own chapter into a story that one way or another will never stop being told.